Hello, and I'm very, very pleased that I've got an amazing guest on the show today. I've been reading all about this lady called Jane Peyton, and we kind of a few weeks ago on the Ale and Audio podcast and also on Ale and Radio, we talked a bit about and we featured, we had this big Beer Day Britain sort of celebration on the Ale and Radio live station, and we encouraged people to, take pictures with the drinks, do cheers for beer and all that kind of thing. And we did a bit of a celebration of that on Ale and Radio. Well, I'm very, very pleased that I've got the founder of the whole thing of Beer Day Britain on the show with us today. And not only that, but she is a beer educator, not just beer, but alcoholic drinks educator. She's also a world record breaker. She is, like I said, an educator. She's a broadcaster, a writer, multi-talented. So impressed that we've got her on. It's Jane Peyton. How are you doing, Jane?
I'm very well, thank you. And thanks so much for supporting Beer Day Britain. Much appreciated.
Not at all. It's a brilliant thing. We love supporting it. And thank you for sharing the Cheers to Beer song as well, which people will have heard, will hear as part of this little segment on our music version of our show. I love that little song that you created as well.
Thank you. No, it's fun, isn't it? It's really fun to sing. It's a good song for singing with your mates in the pub or while you're drinking beer. And that was the intention of it. Singing makes us feel happy. It brings us together. It bonds us. So what better than having a lovely glass of beer with your mates and singing a song?
It's definitely a catchy number, so you could easily, remember the lyrics to that one and sing that in with all your mates and all that kind of thing. We'll get back on to talking about Beer Day Britain shortly, but first of all, I mean, thanks for joining us because you are multi-talented. You've won awards, really incredible stuff. So, I mean, I think the best thing. I mean, we could be here all day, but I know we haven't got all day to talk. But we'll try and summarize as much as we can. But where did your journey in beer start then?
I'm from Skipton in North Yorkshire, and Yorkshire's a beer county, like many of the British beer counties are. But I was luckily from a family who enjoyed going to the pub. So even as a child, we'd go to the pubs, so private pub rooms for birthday parties and baptisms and wedding receptions, things like that. So I was always used to being in a pub and being around people who were enjoying themselves in the pub. So when I got to my teenage years, and we used to go to the boozers in my hometown, and I would drink beer and I'd drink real ale. And I knew that real ale was the better thing to drink than the keggy stuff. Now, in those days, kegged beer wasn't the lovely craft beer that we have now and full of flavour. It was fairly mundane, actually, to be honest. So real ale was my thing. Tettley bitter, tettley mild. And so I was always a beer drinker, and then went to university in Leeds, and as a student drank anything at all. But then one afternoon, I went to a pub in Otley, which is a market town in West Yorkshire. And the pub was called The Junction. And some of your listeners may know this pub. It's renowned for selling Timothy Taylor's hand-pulled real ale, really well kept. And I had a pint of Landlord ale, which I'd had before I was a student. And it was so delicious, and it looked so beautiful the way it was poured with that gorgeous big creamy head on it. And I thought, why am I drinking rubbish, whatever I was drinking? Why aren't I drinking this all the time? So that was my epiphany to start drinking real ale again. And then I never looked back.
Amazing story. I mean, you've become a huge advocate for beer, and everything that you do is just amazing. So you write books, you've been on like TV shows and things like that as well. So from the sort of journey that you had with beer, how did you then propel into all of that sort of thing?
Well, as an amateur beer drinker and a person going to the pub, I started my own business in 2008. Now, previous to that, I'd had careers in public relations. I'd lived in the USA, worked as a TV producer of documentaries. And when I came back to live in England in the early 2000s, I wrote some books, I did some journalism, and I realized that I really wanted to have my own business. And I wanted my own business doing something that I was really passionate about and that I would put a lot of effort into. And that every day I got up, it wouldn't feel like work because A, it was my business, but B, I was doing something that I really loved. So I made a list of things that I really loved. I made a list of things that I was good at and how I could professionalize it and make money out of it. So in my list of things that I really enjoyed, going to the pub, drinking beer, being with people, being sociable, and then what I was really good at was production, public speaking, writing, managing. And so I thought, well, actually, I could start a business connected with alcoholic drinks because I'm fascinated by history as well. Start a business educating people about alcoholic drinks and specializing in beer. Now, at the time, there weren't many, in fact, any companies who were doing corporate beer tasting events. So I thought, well, this is my niche. So I have to get educated. Now, unfortunately, at the time, there was no professional education for beer. So I did a wine and spirit education trust course because the principles of tasting wine and spirits are the same as tasting beer, actually, or any alcoholic drink. In fact, water as well. You can do the same principles. So my WSET accreditation gave me the credibility to do corporate events for big banks and international car companies and international media companies. Apple was one of my very early clients, Discovery Channels. So I had this business called the School of Booze, where I specialized in beer tasting, and it just grew from there. Now, I always knew that I wanted it to be more than corporate events, but I realized that that was a well-paid way of starting my business off. Really what I wanted to do, write more books, become a trainer, an educator, do consultancy work. So anything to do with alcoholic drinks. And that's how it started. Then beer education became available through the Beer and Cider Academy, which doesn't exist, by the way, anymore. So I became one of the first accredited beer sommeliers in Britain. And a few years later, cider education became available. So I became the UK's first accredited cider sommelier. And you mentioned my world record. That was for hosting the world's largest beer tasting tutorial. And it was a Guinness World Record. Oh, you've done really, oh God, look at you. Photos. I'm very impressed. It was, I think it was 1,256 people. And the reason that they hired me to do the hosting of it was because I was a well-known accredited beer sommelier. So I wasn't just anybody who happened to like beer and could talk about beer. You know, I had an accreditation. So yes, so I'm an educator, I'm an advocate, I'm a writer. I encourage people to really understand what they're drinking, because if you understand how it's made, where the flavors come from, all the facts about that particular drink, you respect it more and you drink it in a different way. So you think about it while you're drinking. You're not just glugging it mindlessly. You're thinking, wow, yeah, I can really smell that caramel or those lovely aromatic hops, that citrus, that pine, whatever. So that makes you appreciate it more. And then you think, ooh, yeah, I like the bitterness of that. And like, ooh, and you just know it. And it becomes just something really fun to do, I think. I mean, you've probably done the same, Jimbo, that you've been to the pub or you're with your mates and you put a glass of beer to your nose and you can smell really gorgeous aromatic hops or the malt coming through or the chocolate, the coffee from the porter or the stout. And you'll say to your pals, oh, like, what are you drinking? Oh, you know, and you'll have a smell of it. You might even swap drinks and say, have a taste of that. I don't think that happens with any other alcoholic drink. You know, I don't see people doing that with vodka. Certainly don't see them doing it with wine. They might do it with cider a little bit, possibly real craft cider. But beer just has this communal element to it that brings people together, makes them want to share and makes them want to enthuse about it.
It's brilliant. And, like you were sort of saying there, when you start going on that beer journey, you do suddenly find yourself one day, every time you get a drink, the first thing you do is you're smelling it and you think, I wouldn't have done that before. I wouldn't have done that years ago. You
Yeah,
start getting into that kind of thing. And then, yeah, really appreciating it. And, obviously appreciating how many great breweries there are in, this country, but across the world as well.
yes.
You mentioned craft beer at the start as well, because obviously that has been the big thing. And although we love all sorts of beer on this podcast, like craft beer is the big thing that a lot of our audience are really into. So where how what is your sort of go to craft beers? Is there anyone that's standing out to you? Do you drink a lot of it yourself, or you still largely big sort of firm favorite of the real ale?
Yeah. Oh, yes, I absolutely love real ale. But fortunately, there's loads of craft breweries
Hmm.
that also produce real ale or sell it into pubs as real ale. I really enjoy to support independent breweries. I love to explore different brands, taste beers that I've never tried before. I'm very fortunate to live in Brighton, where there's some really great independent pubs, and you never know what you're going to get because they have an ever-changing selection of beers. So I go and I look at the menu and think, oh, I haven't tried that before. Oh, great. Oh, I love that one, and whatever. I mean, my go-to, I'm sure your listeners will agree, some of them will agree with this. There are certain breweries who you just know every single beer that they brew is brilliant, and you're always going to get a good one. And they do a big variety. And for me, it's Brewster's in Grantham, one of the original craft breweries in Britain, actually. I think they're about 26 years old now. So Sarah Barton has won British Brewer of the Year a couple of times. Absolutely brilliant beers, which I think are underrated because they're not hip and they don't do loads of social media, so they don't get out there with the the craft beer
Hmm.
crowd who like sort of, who followed social media a lot. So they're really underrated, but I would highly recommend every single beer by Brewster's. Always balanced, never gimmicky, just absolutely brilliant, quaffable beers. Love them. I also love Thornbridge. Oh gosh,
Oh
Thornbridge
yeah.
is so Utopian Brewery. They're a Devon brewery, and they started off specializing in lager style beers. Now, lager for many years has had a bad reputation in this country because of cooking lager, as we'd call it, or the cheap beers made by the humongous global, behemoths,
Yeah.
which are made in 5 days rather than 5 months. They're just like pumped out like that. So they have got a bad reputation. But recently in the craft beer world, in the last probably 3 or 4 years, I'd say, particularly, pale lagers have been coming back. Because lager is actually, it's a family of beers to begin with. So you get Hells, you get Pilsners, Dunkels, black lagers, actually. There's loads and loads of different lager styles. Very difficult to make because there's nowhere to hide when you're a brewer. With an ale, you can just pump loads of hops into it,
Hmm.
and hops will fake your brain into thinking, ooh, like that. Now,
Yeah.
it may not even be a good beer, but you can fake it by just adding loads of hops. Good beer, for me, good brewing is all about balance. Malt is the
Hmm.
backbone of beer. Without malt, beer wouldn't be beer. That is the definition of beer. It's a fermented malt drink. So you need to get your malt flavors in your beer as well, the characteristics. So lagers have been really coming back in. And I think this is for me, it's very welcome because I don't know about you, but I'm not keen on New England IPAs and the hazy pales, which are very soft, big fruit bombs, which have no bitterness in them. And I'm not keen on those beers, but that seems to be a dominant style in craft brewing currently. So you go into pubs and that's all you get. You get versions of hazy pales, and I love
They have
bitterness.
they've certainly flooded the market, haven't they? And now and everybody's doing that kind of thing. So when you do go back to something like a lager, but an actual craft lager as well, you do think, oh, this is good. I've kind of forgotten
Mm,
that this is
yeah.
good beer sort of thing. I mean, what we do a feature on this show called Desert Island Beers, which we'll definitely have to get you on soon. And it's basically a series of questions about, you know, your favorite breweries, bars, beers, and all that kind of thing. And you know, Augustina Hells, for example, is one of is
Amazing.
the it's the most popular. Like, you know, despite all these, like I say, New England IPAs, hazy beers, all that kind of thing, that is the beer that's kind of been chosen the most by the people who've taken part in Desert Island Beers. And there's been, like, you know, over 40 different episodes of that so far. So it does show that still a good quality lager, and the Bavarian lagers and stuff like that as well, are still the standouts when it comes to Desert Island beer answers.
Absolutely. One of the pubs I was when I mentioned earlier the Brighton pubs that I go to, one of them is called the Hole in the Wall. Amazing selection of lagers and ales,
Mm-hmm.
and they always have Augustina Hells on, and it's one of
Ooh.
the landlord, Jim. It's one of his favourites, and he'll quite often do a photo outside the pub just of a glass of Augustina, and those are classic beers. So I'm not surprised actually that your Desert Island Beers that comes up so often. It's just beautiful beer. Well, Utopian, who I was mentioning earlier, a British brewery. If people like Augustina Hells, I would highly recommend, even if they don't like it actually, highly recommend trying Utopian beers. They specialise particularly in Czech style lager beers.
Okay.
And all the ingredients are British grown, so British hops, British malts, amazing beers, absolutely amazing. I think they're just about to start doing a West Coast IPA, actually. But anyway, highly recommend.
I'm sure people will be taking up that advice from you. So you mentioned, before we move on to talk about something else, but you mentioned you're in Brighton. So have you? I'm assuming you've had a fair few beers from Beak. I think they're in that kind of area and kind of making big waves at the minute, aren't
Yeah,
they?
Beak are in Lewis, which is the county town, not far away. Yeah, you don't really get many Beak beers, to be honest, even though it's fairly near.
Mm,
Yes, I like the dark beers that they do there. I'm not so keen on the hazy pales. You know, again, it's that sort of
mhm.
soft fruitiness that I'm not so keen on. But I think their port is very good, and the dark beers I've had from them, very good. I think they're just about to open a tap room, or will be opening a tap room in Brighton at some point soon. They've got planning permission for a
Yeah,
site. It's a really good site. It'll be great if they can open it and get it open.
excellent. One thing I need to bring up, because this is amazing. I think it was 2016. You got a lifetime achievement in beer.
I
What a
did.
what an award! What a bit of recognition that was.
I got that from so the British Parliament have all these different groups, interest groups. So you might get things like the All Party Parliamentary Tennis Group or Football Group or whatever. Now, the biggest membership of these groups is the beer group. So I got a lifetime achievement in beer from the All Party Parliamentary Beer Group. And it was for my work in beer, but I think it was specifically for founding Beer Day Britain, which I'd done in 2015. So that was, I wish my parents had been alive to see that happen, because that's, yes, something. That photo that you're showing, by the way, that the
Yeah,
guy who had the chain around his neck, I had a chain around my neck. I don't know if you can see.
I can just see that. Yeah.
Yes, he had his, you know, because he was the secretary of the beer group. He was an MP. I don't think he's an
Hmm.
MP anymore. Mike Nichols, I think.
Hmm.
No, that was a good one to have. I liked that award. That was great. Got a
Oh,
tankard.
brilliant!
Yeah.
And that brings us nicely on to the, you know, to Beer Day Britain then. So like I said, this first time was 2015. So where did all this come from then? The idea for Beer Day Britain?
Well, beer is Britain's national drink, but we didn't have a national day to celebrate it. And Britain, historically, has been a really major influence on brewing around the world. So more styles of beer currently brewed around the world were first brewed in Britain than any other brewing nation, including Germany, the Czech Republic, and Belgium, which are also brewing powerhouses historically. So particularly in the craft brewing world, you know, the IPAs and versions of, you know, 25% of craft beer brewed in the world is a version of an IPA. Now, that
Hmm.
was a beer style that was originally brewed in Britain. So porters, stouts, milds, golden ales, barley wines, Scotch ales, all sorts of different styles of beer. First brewed here, now brewed around the world. But we didn't have a date to celebrate this. Now, if you're celebrating beer in Britain, you also celebrate pubs, because 7 out of 10 drinks sold in a pub are beer. So you can't have beer without pubs, I don't think, in this country. You know, without beer, pubs would be wine bars.
Mm-hmm.
So because I was in the beer world, you know, and other worlds as well, but other alcoholic drinks world, but beer in particular. And I know quite a lot of people in the trade and the organisations who are involved in beer, you know, CAMRA, Society of Independent Brewers, Beer and Pub Association, Caskmark, you know, I knew a lot of people in these. So I said, well, why don't we have a beer day? And they were going, oh, no, well, nobody's ever done it. So I said, well, I'll start it, thinking that then it would be taken over by somebody else. So I started it in 2015, and I thought, well, we need a significant date to hang it on. Not just any random date. What could it be? So I thought, could it be Shakespeare's birthday, April the 23rd? And that's sort of that's St. George's Day as well. I don't just want it to be about England, it's about Britain. And then I looked at Magna Carta, which actually was only about England anyway, having said that. But Magna Carta was 800 years old in 2015. So it was sealed in 1215, not signed, sealed. And it mentions ale in clause 35. And I thought, well, Magna Carta is such a significant legal document. The fact that it mentions ale, I think that that's a really good date to have. Plus, it's June the 15th, which is good because it's summertime, or almost, and a little bit warmer with the weather, and you can drink in the beer gardens, things like that. So I established it with no budget. I still have no budget. I've self-funded it. And the extraordinary thing is that it's almost got its own life now. I mean, I still have to coax it along a little bit. But, you know, last year it was on Countdown. The host of Countdown mentioned it for 2 minutes. He spoke about Beer Day Britain for 2 minutes, about Magna Carta connection. I hadn't contacted him. So it's out there. And people celebrate it. And the whole idea, it's just a really simple thing, is drink beer, ideally with your friends, ideally at the pub, celebrate beer. If pubs can do an event, do some beer and food matching, or have a quiz, or just something to get people into the pubs, and just celebrate what we're really good at, which is brewing in this country, and it's our national drink. Celebrate the fact that British malt is so brilliant. Celebrate that one job in brewing creates, I think it's 20 jobs in the supply chain. So it's a major part of Britain PLC as well. And it's fun, and it brings us together and unites us. So the highlight of the day is the National Cheers to Beer at 7 p.m. Raise a glass of beer. I know you were doing it on your show, Jimbo. Thank you for that. And just do a social media post, #Cheers to Beer, and people just have a really good time. So that's the whole idea of Beer Day Britain.
And I saw it everywhere, you know. Not, you know, we were obviously doing it on our 24/7 radio station, but I saw it everywhere. I saw my own local pubs that I follow on Facebook. I saw lots of the breweries that I follow on Instagram. You know, national breweries, craft breweries. You know, the real ales, the independent ones. They were all posting about it and sharing it. So you've done really well to get it out there, and you know, it's got its own little life, hasn't it? And it's kind of running away with itself a little bit. And I can imagine it'll only be more and more of a thing as years go by. And it's a great thing as well, because it's not an easy time for the industry and for pubs and bars in particular. So it's a really, really good thing. So congratulations for launching that, because it will continue to be an important thing as well.
Yes, I hope so. And I hope it'll become as natural to publicans and to beer drinkers as St. Patrick's Day is. Now, that's associated with Guinness. Mm-hmm. So that they own St. Paddy's Day, don't they? But people go, you know, pubs put so much effort into St. Patrick's Day. So hopefully they'll do the same for Beer Day Britain.
That's it. And I love the how you've sort of tied it back to sort of British beer heritage as well. And I've been reading your website, and there's something I need to ask you. I need to ask you, what did Cleopatra and Jane Austen drink?
Ooh, well, don't know exactly what styles they were for. Well, not for Cleopatra anyway, because there were so many different styles of beer in Egypt, and the beers had beautiful poetic names like the beer of the heavenly people and the beer of good friendship. That's how the name's translated. We do know that there were no hops in Egypt, so the beer would not have had that hop character that our beers have now. Some of them would have been bitter, but only because they were using bitter herbs, which they didn't actually put into the brew. They would have put bitter herbs into the cheek, into the mouth, held the bitter herbs in the cheek. So when they drank the beer, they would have got a bitterness from it because of the herbs. Now, they would have had a sweetness, those beers, and they had dates and things like that with them, because you would have needed a secondary source of sugars for fermentation, because the malting process wasn't as efficient then as it is now. So they wouldn't have got all the sugars from the malt like we do now for fermentation. So an external or an extra source of sugar, fruit, dates, very, very easy to source. The alcohol level would have been lower because it was wild yeast that was fermenting the beer, and it may not have been, wild yeast, doesn't normally get really high levels of alcohol. So she would have been drinking a cloudy, sweetish beer, and she would have been drinking what other people were drinking at that time, but she would have been drinking it through a straw.
Oh, okay.
The beer would probably have had husks floating around in it.
Yeah.
Why drinking straws were invented, because people wanted to drink the alcohol and not get a mouthful of husk or any detritus from the wine or the beer or whatever they were drinking. So they would drink out of, if you were poor, you would drink out of a reed, a reed stalk, which was hollow. If you were wealthy, Cleopatra, she would have had special beautiful golden straws, which were decorated with lapis lazuli or jewels, things like that. She would have had a ceremonial straw. So that was Cleopatra. By the way, Cleopatra was the first person to put tax on beer. She added tax on beer.
Do we have to boo her for that then?
We have to boo her for that. She was funding war. So in fact, a lot of tax on beer in different countries was also levied for the same reason. Jane Austen, she loved spruce beer. Now, spruce ale or spruce beer is made from treacle and molasses, and it really isn't a beer, actually. It's just molasses that are fermented. But there was a brewery at Chawton Cottage where Jane Austen lived. She would have known how to brew, and she would have drunk beer because everybody drank beer in those days. So her ale was probably, I guess, what we would possibly call a barley wine nowadays. Beers were stronger in those days. We've got used to beers being lower alcohol, like 3.5%, 4%. Beers used to be stronger. So her beer would have been stronger. It would have been something for the table, possibly. But yes, she was a beer drinker. And she liked a wine as
brilliant.
Well. Yeah,
I mean, it's been fascinating speaking to you. Absolutely brilliant. And you're an author as well?
Yes, I've written. I've had 11 non-fiction books published. I think 6 of them have been about alcoholic drinks. My latest one was published last week, actually, on June the 13th, The Philosophy of Cider. I've done the philosophy of beer, philosophy of cocktails, philosophy of gin, now the philosophy of cider. I also write novels under a pen name B.A. Summer, which are nothing to do with alcoholic drinks, but yes, there's plenty of mention of alcoholic drinks, and there's also a pub called the Weasel.
Oh, brilliant! You've invented your own fictional pub.
I have, but it's brilliant. Like my perfect pub. It's my perfect pub, the Weasel, and it's in my novels.
Excellent. So, if anyone's going on any holidays this summer and you want to do any reading while you're away, and obviously you're a beer lover, which a lot of our audience are, or cocktails or cider or anything like that, check out Jane Peyton's publications. Really good stuff. And you've also done lots of, I know you're on our podcast now. You do your own podcast as well, don't you? And you're also, I think you've appeared in various kind of like broadcasts as well when you're talking about beer and other things.
Yes, I do quite a lot of radio in particular. I've done a little bit of television, and I do BBC radio often, lots of regional radio, particularly because I've got knowledge in alcoholic drinks.
Mhm.
I don't just talk about beer, although a lot of radios do like me to talk about beer, but because I've got knowledge of all alcoholic drinks, and there's so much interesting history about alcohol. I get people asking me to talk about various subjects on alcohol. Sometimes it's current, so it might be about current events and drinks, or it might be historic subjects. But it's something I enjoy doing. And because I used to be a producer of TV documentaries, I know that producers are a little bit lazy, actually. And once they've found somebody who has a specific knowledge, and once they know that that person can talk coherently about it and speak in full sentences, then they go back regularly to that same person.
Oh, you've caught me out. Oh, I was going to do that from now on. Brilliant. I wanted to mention something actually while you were talking about straws, Jane. I've got it. I know that straws are making a comeback with beer drinking, and do you know why they are? Do you know why?
Why?
Because a lot of beer drinkers these days have got very big beards that they're very proud of. So they're taking their own straws out with them to drink the beers. And I know one person who did this. He doesn't drink at the minute, but he's called Horny Shawnee, one of our, because he drinks beer. He used to drink beer out, or I think he still does occasionally, drinks beer out of a Viking horn shaped thing.
Yeah.
So, but he's got a big beard and he carries his own straw around with him when he goes on like a pub crawl.
Wow.
So
I'll just say something about that. I haven't seen anybody do it, but I'll just talk about something scientific actually about the way we taste beer and experience it. It's all about the aroma. So the brain registers 80% of flavour through the nose. Now, Horny Shawnee, drinking through his straw won't get that sense of the aroma as much by putting the glass to his nose. But what he will do, and which is what we all do, is that if you let the beer or anything you're drinking sit on your tongue for a few seconds, then the aromas go up through the roof of your mouth into the bulb of your nose, where you've got millions of smell cells. They're called olfactory cells, because the tongue only registers tastes. It doesn't register flavor. Taste and flavor are different things. Taste is bitter, sweet, acidic, salt, and savory. Everything else is registered through the nose. So you have to let your beer sit for a few seconds, particularly if you're drinking it through a straw, and then you can get all those full aromas from it, and you can think about what you're tasting and the flavors.
Absolutely brilliant, Jane. You're amazing. Honestly, I'm learned so much, and I could sit and chat with you all day about beer, and we will have a little bit of a chat after we've finished this recording. But thank you very much. Have you got anything, like, just to finish on? Have you got any plans going? You've obviously just published your latest book. Have you got any more plans like coming up in the near future?
I've got a novel coming out in July, so a sequel to another novel I've written. Let me have a little think about this. Well, the pub. Got to go to the pub. Oh, the footy's on.
Yes.
So I've been going to the pub and drinking lovely beer and watching the footy. I've got some talks coming up about cider. Actually, I've got a couple of cider talks coming up. And tequila. Actually, I'm doing 5 events about tequila tasting. Battersea Power Station in London has 4 chimneys, and it's a very famous, iconic building, as many people will know. And one of the chimneys now has a lift inside it that goes up to a glass viewing platform, which is an enclosed platform. And the owners of Battersea Power Station want me to do some tequila tasting events up there. So that's the next thing on the thing that I'm doing. So I'll be looking out over the river and over that part of London and explaining to people what tequila and mezcal is.
That was amazing. Would you ever like? I don't know if it's something you've ever actually had before, but have you ever had, or would you like to have your own pub or bar one day?
Well, people ask me this a lot, actually, and the answer is no, because I'd be like Peggy Mitchell on the EastEnders.
Get out of my pub.
And I'd be like, get out of my pub. So yeah, if people were rude, or if they were really obnoxious, all that, or everything that we dislike about certain people in pubs, I wouldn't want them in my pub. I'd be really picky on who came in.
Are you ready for this?
Get out of my pub! You heard me. Get out!
There we go.
So absolutely brilliant. So yeah, that would be me permanently. Now, I much prefer to be on this side of the bar and
Yeah.
drinking the beer from this side of the bar rather than the other side of the bar.
Well, you know what? It sounds like you actually do need. You may need yourself a little home bar or a pub shed. That's what you could do, and then it doesn't matter who you kick out or whatever, who you invite round, because it's
It would just be me then, wouldn't it? I'd be sitting there being
That's
a
it.
sorry beer drinker on my own.
Jane, it's been amazing chatting. Thank you so much. I know it won't be the last time. We'll definitely have to have a chat with you again, and also get you on our Desert Island Beers feature as well, because it'd be brilliant, your answers. So, yeah, we'll definitely organise that. Hang fire. I'll have a chat with you after. But yeah, big round of applause for Jane Peyton. Thank you very much.